Okay, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, members and
So
guests.
who's the judge?
It is June the 5th, 2023, and this is a regular online meeting of the West Shore Photography
Hi,
Club.
this is Tori speaking. Who's the judge? I'm sorry.
We'll introduce him shortly. So just hang on, please. Okay.
Okay, okay.
Yep, June the 5th, 2023, regular meeting of the club.
Pin him.
We have a competition tonight. There is no theme, and Bryson Leidich is the judge. But before we get to Bryson and the images, just a couple of things. We have two brand new members. I'd like them to, briefly introduce themselves. Tom Dry, would you unmute yourself and just say a few words about where you're from and what your life's all about?
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Hi, I'm Tom Dry. I went to school for photography way back when. I went to art school, all that. Kind of fell by the wayside for the last several years. And I retired at the end of last year and was thinking about getting back into it and fell backwards into the best deal on the planet on a DSLR Canon. And I'm gonna get back into it. And I really look forward to getting to know you guys. Here in Camp Hill, nothing really special, and if you see behind me, it's kind of like I live in an art installation, it seems.
Very good. Thanks, Tom, and welcome to the
You're
group.
welcome. Thank you.
Thea, would you introduce yourself? Let's see, you need to unmute yourself. There we go. I'll ask her to unmute. Okay, maybe we can pick her up a little bit later. Okay, as far as meetings go, a reminder that next week, June the 12th, there is no meeting. The following week, we have a special treat for you. June the 19th, Mike Donovan has something cooked up, and I'm not sure what it's all about. But Mike, would you explain briefly what you have in mind?
No, actually.
Okay, on to the next item. Go ahead.
I will say that the title of our presentation will be Funkatography, and you will hopefully learn some ways to make your photography more funky and more fun, hopefully.
I've been looking to do that for years, and finally, you're going to show me how to make my photography funky.
All right,
Okay.
Let's do it.
Is that it, Mike?
That's it.
Okay, very good. We're looking forward to that. Let me turn it over to Joe to talk to you about trips.
Okay, thanks, Dennis. We have quite a few trips coming up on our calendar. The first one is on Saturday, the 10th, and also on Saturday, the 24th of June. So, and Norbert Fry is leading both of those. So Norbert, can you give us a brief idea of what those two trips are about?
Yes. The first one on the 10th is going to be at the Rolls-Royce Bentley Museum over outside of Mechanicsburg on Hemp Road. We're going to meet there at 9:30. We will meet Sarah Hollenbach at the entrance, and she'll give us a rundown on do's and don'ts there. I would suggest you bring a macro lens possibly, and a wide angle might be something to work with for her. And they're going to give us access to the cars. Now, I haven't been there. They just redid their whole setup, and I've not been able to get in because they wouldn't allow me in. But anyway, they've changed the car alignment somehow. There's some new displays, what I understand, where we're going to have access to the garage area also. So anyway, it's going to be a fun couple hours, I think.
And Norbert, that's the Bentleys in there also.
Yes,
In
yeah,
addition to
that's
the-
also, that's correct, yes.
Great.
And actually, they give us pretty much carte blanche. Like I said, if they want a donation. Oh yeah, by the way, she said when I talked to her last time, she said, I would love to have some images of you guys when you do your photography. Maybe we can use it in our promotional works. So that's just up front. Okay.
And then on the 24th?
24th, we're going to the Steelton Skate Park. We've been there a few times before. And that's a good opportunity to do live skate park action. And it's that's a fun time too. I mean, and it can be tough. It can be tough to photograph there because of the way the layout is. but there's some good opportunities to get some good action shots there.
Okay, great. Thanks, Norbert. We
Sure.
have a trip on the 15th, on Thursday of June 15th. Dennis is going to be doing that over at Messiah. What are you going to be doing there, Dennis?
Well, it's a little mini workshop for those folks who are interested in infrared photography. But here's the catch. I don't have a converted camera, and I'm not going to talk about that approach. Okay. I went the cheap route and bought an infrared filter for my regular camera and an attachment for my iPhone. Okay. So I can get infrared pictures with both. With the iPhone, the exposures aren't all that long. You can handhold them. But for the regular camera, you're talking an exposure of a couple of minutes, and mostly during midday when there's a lot of bright sunlight, infrared light. So if you're interested in that sort of thing, if you have the equipment, that's great. If you don't, but you're interested, I'll show you how to get started with that aspect of it. If people are interested, then sometime later, we might have someone talk about shooting infrared with a converted camera. That's where you send it away and they take the filter off the camera and reconfigure it, and then you can only use it for infrared. I just use a filter that attaches either to the iPhone or to my regular camera. Okay.
Thanks, Dennis. We have some others. I'm just going to rattle off some of the other trips we have in July. We have a Boiling Springs photo walk, which Eve and Mary are going to be doing. We're going to have the State Capitol waterfall at night. That's always a really popular one. We're going to do that on a Wednesday night, photographing that. And then we have a Messiah College mentoring workshop, photo walk rather. And we're also going to be, and we have a night photo workshop on a Wednesday night in August, and that's going to be a lot of fun. And we've already scouted that out. We know where we're going to go, and we'll have lots of information on that. We have myself, Karen Cummings, and Eve and myself doing that. And then Mary Fox and Eve are going to be doing another photo walk in Harrisburg. So we have a full agenda. And we're also scheduling right now a lighting workshop over at Fine Art Photo. We don't have that date knocked down yet. And there'll be a sunflower shoot also. So that's it.
Okay, thanks, Joe. Okay, let's get started with the competition. Bryson will turn it over to you, and you can share your screen and get right to it, unless there's anything you want to tell them in a preliminary fashion.
All righty.
Looks good.
I do want to tell you a little short story that led to the way that I managed to do things the last time we got together. Prior to my last judging, I was doing an image review for a student, and this particular student was really fresh to photography, almost no experience in Photoshop and very little in Lightroom. So post-processing, managing the images was just simply not part of the process. It was simply, what do I see? And that kind of led me to thinking about how I judge, how we judge, how we look at images. And I was reminded that in days gone by, when we dealt with film, we used to have slide competitions. So we would look at images that were shot on slide film, and you had minimal control over your slide film. You could choose the ASA, ISO for those of you who are younger. Whether it was daylight balanced or tungsten, you could put filters on it, you could put a polarizer on it, etc. But for the most part, it was a matter of what did I see and how good a job did I do capturing the image. So I went back to that thought process, and the thing that resulted from that was higher scores. That didn't surprise me. But I really thought that it was interesting to manage things that way, looking at things in terms of what did you see? What did you capture? Because the first part of an image is capture. Capture and basic composition are the first step to good photography. The second step is what we're faced with now, because as digital photographers and with Lightroom and Photoshop, et cetera, we've been handed a level of responsibility that we really didn't have before. Now we're not only responsible for the content and the composition and the basic capture, but we're more involved in what does this picture look like from my perspective? What do I want you to see? And how can I manage the photography and the output in order to enhance the image, simplify the content, et cetera, et cetera. Basically, we look at photographs two ways. We look at it with one side of the brain that says, this is what I saw, this is what I recognize, this is what I thought was pretty, what do you think? The other half of the brain is looking at things that we have a tendency, I think, sometimes to not ignore, but not pay as much attention to as we might. And that is the sophistication of the balance in the image, the tonal values, the way the values in the image lead our eye to look at certain things and to control how we react, if you will, to the images. So that was the reason for what I did. And I'm going to enhance that now by going on to stage 2, which is saying, okay, let's get back to being responsible for the finished image. I told this story before, but I'll do it very, very briefly. Way back in the 90s, I was in competition. I had 4 images in the statewide competition, PP of A. In PP of A, you go to state first, and then your images, if they reach a certain level, automatically are accepted at national. They're rejudged, and then you get an opportunity to get a blue ribbon or not. I had 4 images. I had high 70 scores, which is very good, but you have to break 80 to get a blue ribbon. I asked a printer that I knew to take a look at my images and say, you know, okay, what am I doing wrong here? And he made me an offer. He said, okay, I'll reprint all 4 of your images in time for you to get to national. Anything that does not get a blue ribbon, you pay for. It cost me a lot of money. And what it taught me was that the impact of that final presentation of how that image looks and how people react to that image is as important, if not more important, to the content and, you know, just your original capture. So what you saw is important, but what you do with it is what elevates it from a good capture to a great image. Keep that in mind. Here we go. Number 1, horn separator. This is a good capture and basically a good overall exposure. The handling of the highlights, the handling of the light, excellent. Very, very good. Good shadow detail, holding information down here without running it into the tank. Very, very nice. The balance on the right side is good. I think it needs room on the left. So I think it also could possibly use a little bit of room at the bottom too. When something runs down here like this, I always, my eye follows it and I say, okay, I want to see a little bit more of a base, if you will, something to support this area and just make it balance out. So so we're going with that 10 idea on the original capture, and we're going to go 9 on the overall, considering the final presentation. Okay. Cohick residence. This is also a good capture. It certainly is an attractive looking home. I think overall it's a bit bright. I think if you, one of the things that you can do, and I have a tendency to do this a lot, whenever I'm not quite sure about how something should look, we have a tendency to get caught up in the overall and forget to look very, very closely at the details. Just take your crop tool and crop in on your primary subject and make everything else disappear. And then you should be able to possibly make a better decision as to what the brightness values are, where the bright highlights are, where the shadows are. And then you can uncrop, if you will, to get back to where you were. And you maybe have a little bit better handle on the overall. I think this is a bit bright. There appears to me to be a little bit of an enhancement of color saturation, and it works in most areas, except for these bright greens down here at the bottom. And I really would like to take every image and bring it up in Photoshop and say, okay, look at this and what a difference it makes. I can't do that. So I'll tell you what I did, and then you can go do it yourself. If you select the greens or the yellows and just darken them, you don't have to do anything else, just darken them. You'll find that when this area down here goes darker, the visual attention to the house gets better instantly. So the balance of tonalities is the thing that needs help here. I still think it's a very good capture. I think there's some geometric distortion in here. I would go to the geometry thing in Lightroom and make sure that my verticals were vertical, especially on an architectural subject like this. And between the two of them, I think you would have a much, much better image. Even so, it's still a 9 image. It's a very, very good capture and a good image.
Okay, Bryson,
Yeah.
are you okay if we take a moment to ask the photographer to comment?
Yeah, sure, that's fine.
Okay, can we go back to the first image and start there? Thank you. Okay, could we hear from the photographer, please?
Yeah, that's mine, Kurt Wilkie.
Okay.
That one was taken at Anderson Mill. It's an HDR image. I was attracted to this with the light coming from the window, as well as a window not seen there to the left side. And I appreciate your comment there on the crop. I bounced around a lot trying to figure out what I was going to do with that as well. But yeah, thank you very much.
Okay, thanks, Kurt.
Good. Well done. And who did too?
Okay, you'll need to unmute yourself, the photographer, for image number 2. Okay, Rick, could you tell us who that is?
Yeah, that was Dick Messner.
Okay, yeah, I don't think Dick's online tonight. Okay, on to number 3.
Number 3 is Dazed. It's basically a good capture. I think the overall compositional balance would be improved by just cropping off some from the right-hand side to move this. Your eye wants to go here, and I want that to be, down, I think, over to the right, not down so much, but over to the right a little bit better. I think the, if you like the rule of thirds, that's fine. I think the slightly tighter composition works better for me, but I just think that there's too much on the right-hand side. And if this were to move over to the right, it would balance out a lot better. It's an 8. Who did that?
That would be me, George Kurzik.
Okay, you want to tell us a little bit about the image, George, since it's
Yes,
not
I shot it.
self-evident?
Yeah, I was doing a little bit of pepintosa work. I was working on multiple exposures with intentional camera movement and some zoom create effect of vertigo, if you will. And that's what I was after. And because I shot this static and then I wanted to do this is about maybe 8 to 10 images combined.
Wow,
Okay.
cool.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Very good. Okay. Number 4. This is a good capture. I think it's compositionally very tight to my mind. I like things to live within a space, and there's just too many edges that are creeping in here. The top is a little tight. That doesn't bother me, but the right and left hand side just seems to me like they're crowding the image. So I would like to see this a little more loose. I think also I would do the geometric fix to make the verticals vertical. Whoops, sorry. Hello. I confess that I really have a difficult time understanding some parts of the image. I don't know what makes this dark, this light, and then this dark. There's something visually going on here that's not registering with me. So maybe the maker can tell me precisely what I'm looking at. I like the bright colors. They're not oversaturated. They're very close, but they're not oversaturated to the point where they start to delete detail, and that's a good thing. So I'll give it an 8. Who's the maker?
Yeah, it's Rich Scar. Yeah, this and I agree with everything you said on that. And I've wrestled with this for a long time. I'm really proud of this photograph because I did it with one eye looking at this grand mosque in Abu Dhabi, and the other eye looking out for the religious police who would come along and arrest me for taking this picture. So it actually is, and I wasn't sure if it created a certain effect. It is odd. It's looking through an entryway to the mosque. So when you walk in there, and if you see those two little individuals sitting down up there, so you walk into this archway, and that's what that floor is there. And then you come into the whole thing. It's a massive mosque beyond that, whatever. I didn't know if it created a kind of a different effect or not, but I had mixed reactions about it. But I like the coloring of it, and so thanks, Bryson.
The center section then is literally brighter.
Yeah, what happens is I won't take time, but what happens is where I'm standing here, and I cropped it too tight again. This is the actual shot, whatever, because I was a little anxious when I shot it, but I liked it. When you walk in there, say let you walk about 10 yards, you come into kind of an entryway that has a dome over it.
Oh.
And that's what that kind of top part is there. So when you walk in there, it's all, that's a dome. And then there's a floor underneath, and it's probably maybe 10 feet across. 10 yards across. And then when you get through that little entryway, then you come in, it opens up to a huge courtyard, and that's a mosque behind it. But this mosque is enormous. This is called the Grand Mosque. It's called the Sheikh Zayed Mosque in Abu Dhabi. So it was an odd kind of picture, but I thought I'd enter it because I like it, and I agree with all your comments.
It's fascinating, and the repeat patterns are, especially captivating. So that's really pretty nice.
Well, we just let one last comment is in Saudi Arabia, particularly, whatever, that kind of effect is the eye of God. And so hence the reason why it gets repeated like that.
Excellent. Very good. Number 5 is Ghost. This is a good capture, and it's also a decent black and white conversion, holding the detail in the highlights and holding detail in the shadows. It's fine up here. I don't mind the bottom. Again, just a little bit tight for me on the composition. I find that a lot of people just want to move those edges in until there's, as close to the subject as possible. And I don't think that's particularly the way to do it. I think I just like things to have a bit of air to sit in and a space to surround them that makes some kind of sense. So I think I would just take the left and right out a little bit. It wouldn't even have to be a lot. It would just maybe double this space on either side, and then when you'd be fine from my perspective. So what do you think?
Okay,
Who-
can we hear from the photographer?
Yeah, Bryson. Hi, Dave. Dave Marquetto here. Thanks very much for the comments. You know, I played with the in and out on the sides. The way I look at it on my screen in Lightroom, it might just be the background I'm using, but it's kind of hard because it's all black to me. I don't see the distinction of the gray as much. But anyway, that's what I was comfortable with, and you know, I appreciate your thoughts on it.
You can, I think you could right click on that background and select different values.
Yeah, okay. That makes
And that-
sense, sure.
And that might help you out. I think that's correct. So. This is a nice capture. It's really kind of, it's a unique photo. I think it's cool. The subject content is different. The subject placement.
You know, I'm sorry. This is Tori. Can I jump in? Could we hear the points? I think I might be missing, or are we giving points for each?
Yeah. Did I not give
entries?
that points?
Oh.
Did I forget?
Yeah, I didn't
Dennis?
hear the points.
I
Yeah,
You
I'm
may
sorry.
have.
I didn't hear the points. So
I missed it if you gave it.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. Well, that's an 8.
Okay,
So-
thank you.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
All right. The subject placement and overall composition is really very nicely done. I think there's no doubt about where he should be. I don't want to tighten it up. I don't want to loosen it up. He sits there very, very comfortably. At the same time, I would like to have him isolated a little bit more. So there's too many tonal values here, that are all very, very similar. So I would select the subject and then just darken the outside areas. And that wouldn't have to be severe. It would just simply maybe just to the point of being noticeable. And that would make him, I think, pop a little bit better. If you're accustomed to curves, even if you're just working with the raw in curves and you do the selection, you just bring the top right curve down. It lowers the whites and also lowers the overall contrast, but it doesn't have any effect on the darks. And that would work I think, very well in this instance. And so we'll go with another. I want to give her a 9. This is a good 9. I'm pretty happy with this.
Okay, Bryson, could I ask your thoughts on the select subject feature in Photoshop and in Lightroom? How do you feel about that?
Well, it's like any other feature in both, and that is when it works, it's great. And when it doesn't, then you just have to go in there and fuss. I think people, when they select something, in some cases, you have to be very careful. You have to make sure that you're just getting every pixel correct. And in many cases, it's just not that critical. Sometimes the select subject works extremely well. I did try it on this and it picked up a few things that it picked up this box in addition to him. But you just go into quick mask and change the mask. It's not a big deal. Refining the selection is not a big deal. If you're working in Photoshop, I don't do selecting much in Lightroom. If you're working in Photoshop, if you make a selection like this first and then select subject, sometimes it helps to refine that process a little bit better. But then also, if you one of the things that people forget to do that I think is important once a selection is made, especially if you're working in Photoshop with a mask, is to blur that mask so you don't have those hard pixels where the changes you made jump instantaneously from no change inside to total change outside, especially if you do something more than just a subtle change. You need to blur like 3 or 5 pixels, something like that. The idea, what you're doing is you're recreating anti-aliasing, which means you're recreating a transition between your selection and non-selection, if you will. And so that's that. There are times, however, especially if you have to make major corrections where you have to really carefully watch how your selections work.
Okay, thanks. Could we hear from the photographer of Feeling Mellow?
That would be Mary Eileen Carson.
Okay.
And I'd like to thank you for the comments and about the suggestions. My biggest thought, my biggest focus on submitting this is it's a composition, it's a composite. That man's not there. And it's two different pieces, and I worked very hard on many different iterations on this to get it to look like he was actually sitting on that piece of stone or whatever it is.
Well, I'll tell you what, I did not pick up on that at all. So good for you.
I am so relieved because I have been trying so many different composites and trying to, get better and better at it. And that's what I wanted to.
This is what you're looking at, right?
Yes, he's sitting on that.
Yeah. Well, unless you really just examine the heck out of it, you got away with it. So.
All right. Thank you. Thank you.
Really.
Mary
cool.
Eileen, would you briefly describe what the two separate images look like?
Okay. The gentleman with the horn, I shot him down at Capona last September. The background is from a few years ago, New York City, from the High Line. I don't know if people are familiar with the High Line. It's an old elevated train railroad structure that has been turned into a park and a walking way and a walkway. And it's really very interesting. It starts in the meatpacking district, Chelsea area, and finishes at Hudson Yards now. And I've been looking for a background for this guy. I've tried different situations in different positions and different backgrounds, and I kind of landed on this and tried to and worked very hard to put it together. So yeah, the background is from New York City, Manhattan, and he's sitting at the end of the bridge in Harrisburg.
Very good.
Cool.
Just one other quick question. What's your tip for blended color, balancing them to blend them together so the images look like they're one?
Well, a lot of it, one of the reasons I picked this image was, or these two pieces, was the sun was coming in at the same direction on both him and that background. And that's important because, if you have the sun, whatever, and I mean, it wasn't even a lot of sun on either, although he was a little more, he had a little more light than the background. But yeah, that's important because if you have the sun coming in from one direction on him and then another on the background, it becomes obvious that they're really not together there. That's really not, a single composition.
Yes.
But I also did a lot of dodging and burning on him to make it look like he was in that, is sitting under the whatever sun was coming in on that position. So there was a lot of dodging and burning on it, in addition to making sure I had a background with the same sun direction.
Well, I've seen that done very badly, and I can tell you that you're doing good because there's no evidence of fussing on this at all. It just looks like it is there where it is. So good for you.
Thank you.
There you go. That thumbs up. Absolutely.
Thank
Super.
you.
Yep. Very nice.
Number 7. Again, we have a good capture. We have a sharp subject. We've got good freezing of bird in flight. It's an interesting image, and there's nothing that just says there's a problem here. Now, this is one case where if you put the crop tool on this in a rule of thirds, you'll see lines come to places that make you believe that that your composition is good. I disagree. I think the golden ratio is a much better choice. In the crop tool, you have drop downs that allow you to pick different patterns that show you possible locations for subjects. That would require more room on the left-hand side of the image, and I agree with that because that I think would balance things out a little better. You just, whenever you got a subject that's apparently moving in a certain direction, you want to make sure you give them a place to go. So I think this is basically pretty good. The capture is excellent. Whoops, I keep doing that. The capture is excellent. The bird is nice and sharp. Not a lot to complain about, just a little bit more room. We'll give it a 9.
Okay. And the photographer is?
Marlene McNamara. I was at St. Augustine Beach and I was using a D500 and a 150 to 600 lens, and I haven't used it that much, so I was happy with the capture.
Good, very good. You did well.
Thank you.
Okay, Frost Lotus. It's a decent capture and it's a decent black and white conversion. I will just simply admit to not quite understanding what the stuff is, but that's irrelevant. The balance is a little bit on the unusual side. There's an ambiguous center of interest. I want to make this thing the most important thing in the picture. If that is the case, then I think maybe lowering the interest of the surrounding things would emphasize that a little bit more. Make that just simply a little bit more obviously the center of attention. Especially, I keep doing that, especially since this appears to be brighter than this. That could be lighting, that could be any number of different things, but I want to go with this as a center of interest based on its compositional element. And so I would just simply take everything else down a little bit in order to reinforce that visually. And when I say those things, I don't mean any big drastic change. I just mean as soon as it has any kind of a feeling of change, that's sufficient. It takes a while to get used to that. A little bit of a fix down here in the corner, and we'll give this a 7.
Okay, can we hear from the creator? You'll need to unmute yourself. Yeah. Okay, Rick, can you tell us who created this image?
Susan Scatz.
Okay, Susan, yeah, let me see. I don't think Susan's online tonight.
Okay.
Nope, she's not. We'll move on.
Fast Getaway, number 9. This is another good capture. This just reinforces, but the concept. You guys are very, very good at finding and capturing images. So this is a good capture. Obviously, a high shutter speed, frozen water, good sharp subject. Nice darkening in the background, whether that was real or managed later, I don't care. It works. So, what do you say? The color is good. The interest is there. The composition is there. I'm going to give it a 10. This is a good one.
Ooh, all right. Okay, who just earned a 10?
Hi, this is Joan Smith.
Okay, Joan.
Thank you very much. This is a reddish egret, which is taken in Florida on Merritt Island. It's fairly a rare bird, even in Florida. We went out one morning and I knew it was there. I was super excited to see it, and there you have it.
There you go.
Okay, thanks. Very
But
nice.
it is, thank you very much. It is nice morning light. And behind him, there was a lot of reeds behind him and they were high. So this is kind of like when that sun just came right over the top of those reeds.
Excellent.
Great.
Okay, that's our first 10 for the night.
Thank you kindly.
Okay, number 10, whitewater. This is a decent capture. I like the overall composition. I think it's slightly overexposed. Detail is lost in the clouds. And this is very, very high-end detail here is just about gone. I think I'd like to see this in particular with more detail. And I would like to see the whites in the clouds come down a little bit. If you analyze this closely, you'll see that they're not 255, but they're really, really close. And it takes a while sometimes to understand the difference between bright white and textured value white, if you will. So bringing those down, I think would be a good idea. At the same time, I also see the motion in the water. I think it's a good use of long exposure. So I think the photographer is on the right track. However, one thought, and I'm not quite sure, but the long exposure in the water leads me to believe that this was shot at a very small aperture, f/16, f/22. And you have a thing when you do that, especially if it's not a full frame camera, that you get a thing called diffraction, and diffraction will soften critical focus. So if you look at this very carefully, nothing is critically sharp. And I think small aperture probably contributed to that. I'd like to hear myself proven wrong, but that's my assessment without any other information about the image. So we're going to give it an 8, and I'd like to hear from the photographer.
This is Merle Hirsch. It was shot at f/22. It was a long exposure. I don't know how long it was. And it was shot in Iceland off the side of a road. So that's why everything is, well, I guess, lacking detail, but I thought it was pretty creamy. But there probably could have been some more detail in those small falls there, but I don't think the detail existed, even though if I would have brought it down. So because of the exposure time.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. You have a long exposure, Bryson, that blurs the water and you lose the detail there, but yet you want to be careful not to overexpose to maintain some detail.
Well, if you're not overexposed, then the detail is going to depend on the differentiation between light and dark tonal values. There are ways, if there's a little bit of information difference, in other words, if this isn't a solid similar tonal value all the way across, there are ways to exaggerate that difference and to give more of an impression of detail in things like that. It's not as complicated as people think. However, it's a Photoshop technique. I wouldn't say it's necessarily a Lightroom technique. So you bring down the highlights as much as you can in Lightroom and see how much of that you can capture, and then you very carefully bring the whites down to make sure that you get down just above the point. You don't want to start turning gray on you, obviously, but yeah, the f/22 does not surprise me at all. That's an issue with you're trying for a lot of depth of field, so you tend to say, well, okay, 22. I think people don't spend as much time as they should investigating how much depth of field you can get at certain apertures. But I think you'll find that f/8 works really well for an unbelievable amount of pictures, and f/11 if you need a little bit of help, And of course, there's image stacking and all kinds of stuff that you can do. But if I have to go to F16, I start to get concerned about losing that crisp detail in the image. So now you know.
Okay. Now, Joe, I know you and I have talked about this, and you explained to me the technique that you use for maintaining or preserving detail in the waterfalls. Could you explain that briefly?
Yes, I will. That will typically be 2 exposures. I'll take an exposure for the foreground waterfall like we have here. And then for the background waterfall, I'll take another exposure. And then I'll blend those 2 together in Lightroom, then bring them into Lightroom. And then if I need to, I will then go to Photoshop and then do a layer mask on just that to brighten, to get that in.
Yeah.
That's in terms of lighting, but now in terms of focusing, I do a focus stack on that, and I do that manually typically. Now here, Merle's probably using a tripod, but you could do that manually. And when I was in Patagonia, I probably did 100 of those focus stacks in a manual mode, and all but one of them came out fine. And that enables me then to use like an F8, F11, and then do 2 shots, one for the foreground. We'll say for the waterfall you see here, taken for a rock that's like right on the very bottom there. I might do one there, and I might do another one and do one in the background.
Yes, very good.
Okay.
I have also shot long exposure and a second exposure at a shorter time and blended them together in order to force a little bit of detail into what was be otherwise moving water. So,
okay. Yeah, thanks.
Number 11. This is a good capture again overall. We have some color fringing up here against the white sky. I'm not sure that that is something that could be easily overcome, especially because once you get to this point, they also start to lose a little bit of focus. So you're going to have the sky crawling into your detail, and it just gets to be an issue. You want to make sure that you check your lens corrections and make sure they're turned on in Lightroom. Make sure that anything that Lightroom can do to help you with the fringing, which a lot of which can be done automatically. So there's a little bit of clipping at both ends, but it's so minor that it doesn't really affect the image, except for very, very tiny little spots where the whites are bit bright, but it doesn't bother me in that respect. So at 8, and the maker, please.
Okay, you'll need to unmute yourself. Who's the photographer for Dead Vines? Hey, Rick, I guess we need to rely on your help again.
Ginny Reed.
Okay. Apparently Ginny's not with us tonight, so we'll move on to number 12.
Number 12. This is a great capture, and it's a good story. The control over the black point and the white points is very good. The overall lighting leaves an impression that the image is flat, but that's not actually true. You could actually do a little bit of mid-tone contrast control on this with a second layer and maybe soft light that would just give it a tiny little bit of punch. If you work in Photoshop, you can't do that in Lightroom, unfortunately. My biggest concern is that there's just too much non-essential information. This is an image that I would crop, and I would crop pretty severely. I would get rid of all of this stuff at the top. This thing is no good. I'd come up from the bottom, almost right to the bottom of this curb, and maybe somewhere in this neck of the woods, and I would get rid of some of the right-hand side and turn this into a wide panoramic. And I think if you do that, it just seems to, from my mind, to balance out a lot better. So I'd get rid of some of the left, a little bit of the right, top, bottom, turn it into a panorama. With all that said, we'll go 9 on it.
Okay, and who was the photographer?
It was Jim Browninger. Thank you, Bryson. I appreciate the feedback. I was toying with cropping this down. I just walked out of the Capitol after taking my folks for a tour and saw the young lady unprotected from the rain.
Yeah.
And I just threw the camera up, snapped it. I got the whole street. I said, yeah, it looks kind of cool. Turned it to black and white. It was kind of a dreary day.
Yeah.
But like I said, I was toying between cropping it down, so I'll give that a shot and see what it looks like. Thank you very much.
You have to play. You don't know until you play, right? Okay.
Yep. Thank you.
A cold winter's dream. This is a good capture and nice use of minimal color. Good control over the white and black points. This is what you call an impressionistic abstract. I like them, especially when they're well done. And this is a 10.
Ooh, very nice. Okay, the photographer?
That's me, Elaine Shook. Thank you, Bryson. Wasn't expecting that, mainly because I've been trying to capture this scene for 20 years. My satisfaction. So I finally compromised with myself and came up with this. This is a scene that I typically see every year in my property, at least once in the winter, and it's after an ice storm. And what I originally tried to capture was the ice crystals sparkling in the trees the morning after the ice storm came through. And that's been an impossible task because if the sun is shining on it, it looks beautiful to the naked eye, but you try to capture it with a camera and you get nothing but specular blobs. On this morning, it was overcast, so I didn't have that problem, but the ice then tends to just blend in with the rest of the branches. But I edited it in such a way that the detail in those lower branches in the foreground still show somewhat icy, but I just don't have the sparkles that I was trying to capture. But it's part of my series called The Color of Cold. So the intent really is to convey that sense of chill or cold, if you will, using the cooler tones. But at the same time, it conveys to me kind of a paradoxical feeling that I often get having lived in the woods for the past 30 years, in that even though the trees leave you feeling cold, they also give me a sense of comfort in that those trees, as majestic as they are sort of a protective barrier for me. They protect us from the elements, they protect the wildlife, they protect our home. So it is, again, a paradoxical feeling, both chill and comfort.
Very good. Very good. Excellent. Number 14. This is another example of a good capture, good timing, good exposure. And because this, I'm sure that this bright white here right at the where the sun is going down was a something that just didn't last very long. This is the kind of thing that comes and then goes, and then you either catch it or you don't. And so this was a good catch. Let's see, this, I think it's well balanced, but I think it would be better if you got rid of some of the black area at the bottom. I would crop this. I'd get rid of at least half of it, and maybe just a shade higher than the halfway point. A little bit of the top could come off, not a lot, just a little bit. And I think that would turn it into a bit more of a panorama, and I think possibly give it a better balance as far as I'm concerned. Again, I see softness. I don't see crisp resolution in these trees. And so again, I'm tempted to suggest that maybe this was shot at a smaller than necessary aperture, so possible diffraction involved in this. So let the maker prove me wrong.
Okay, can we hear from the photographer, please? Unmute yourself. Rick, help us out.
Ray Conrad?
Oh, okay. Yep. And Ray's not online tonight, so we'll move on to number 15.
Okay, nailed
Oh,
it.
Did you give us a score on that one? I missed it.
Oh, I'm sorry. 7.
Okay, thank you.
All right, this is a good capture. I like the overall balance. I think it's well done. It's nice and sharp. I would like to crop a little bit at the top just simply because this little bump here just and the black spot gained my attention. I'm really detail oriented in terms of minimizing things in the image that do not help you with what you're looking at. That would be a little spot like this little kind of white thing here, some tiny little white spots over here. I get sometimes a little obsessed with that sort of thing, but usually the result is that it just minimizes the image, it just simplifies the image and gets you down to something that the only thing you have to pay attention to is what's important. I think I also would darken this left edge, either the entire thing or perhaps just a vignette that comes in enough to pull this down in order to not have it suck my eye off to the left a little bit. That's another thing I think you need to be very careful of, is to make sure that, your eye goes where it's supposed to go and doesn't have things that are pulling it away. So it's a 9. It's a good image.
Bryson, that's mine. That's Mary Fox. Thank you very much for your input. I left that little dot in at the top because I just thought I should for some reason. And now I'm going to take it off. And I actually lightened that side thinking it was too dark. So I'm going to darken it again.
There you go.
I took lots of dots out and I will lower that top, and that little string at the bottom, I thought it was an extension of something, but apparently it's not. So.
Well, sometimes these things get you.
Yeah. Oh,
But
it was taken at Anderson Mill, and they had so much stuff there, and I'm not quite sure why I took this shot, but I did, among others. And this is the one I like the clarity of it. So that's why I put it in.
Yeah, very good.
Thank you,
I always
Bryson.
find it interesting when you go back through your stuff and you find a shot that you didn't even remember you took, and it's really cool.
Yep,
Okay.
another good example of seeing, Mary.
Yeah.
Thanks, Dennis.
Number 16. This is a decent capture, and it's a humorous story. It's kind of interesting. It's certainly nothing that I would have done, but that's not the point. It's irrelevant. If you do it and you get it right, that's cool. The balance is good. The capture, the crop, I think, is determined entirely by the flops over here, which apparently come off of this fellow or lady, whichever it is, with the artificial beard. In that respect, I think that this side is fine, except I come in just enough to not have that little odd thing going on over here. I also would probably retouch out the spots on the black barrel, simply because they give your eye another place to go, and I don't think you need it. So I would take these off, crop in just a little bit. I would crop out here just enough to not have this hit the edge of the frame. It's interesting to me that the gaze of the gentleman here is very important to the balance of the image, because it really reinforces the story, I think, quite a bit. So just on the basis of being kind of cool, I might, whoops, hello, why did I do that? I might take a little off the top and add a little bit to the bottom. This shoe also, kind of runs into the bottom end a little bit. But this does bother me. I think the crop at the top would be your choice. I don't know about that. So a little bright in a few areas, but nothing critical. We'll give it an 8. And who did this?
This was Diane Parisi. I was, oh dear, what am I going on?
Okay there, Diane?
Okay, I was driving along and saw that, and I quickly parked in an illegal parking place and ran as fast as I could. Running is not my thing these days. And hollered over and said, "I'm going to take your picture." And she, he, it, whatever, struck a pose. But thank you for your comments.
And there I assumed you set that whole thing up.
No, it was one of those things you had to stop and take a picture.
Wow.
Well, good for you. This is a decent capture. I think it's a little on the bright side. I don't think there's the light. It's not blown, but it just seems to be brighter than it needs to be, especially in the middle values. So I think I could see them coming down a little bit. And if you did that, I think maybe it would be a little more comfortable to look at. The problem with things like this is it depends on how you have your monitor set and, whether or not you can get that really good feedback. A well-balanced, a well-calibrated monitor, I think, is essential for making those really critical decisions. So the problem with scenics like this is that they lack a defined center of interest. They kind of exist on their own. They just simply are. I think maybe something with a little bit more of a foreground to background spatial definition would be a nice thing. And we have an image coming up that'll define that for you. So it's an 8. It's well done. Maker?
Okay, could we hear from the photographer, please? You'll need to unmute yourself. Well, Rick, who did this one?
Zach Bergman.
Okay, I guess Zach's not with us tonight, so we'll move on to number 18.
Excuse me. This is great. I love the bird. Nice sharp capture. I think I would probably get rid of both of these out of focus shapes. Since you've got a black background in particular, minimizing the extra stuff would be to your benefit. I think if these two out of focus things went away, I would be happier with the picture. I like the balance. I like the composition. This is fine. I do think that there's a little bit, this doesn't reach out to 255, but I think a little more detail in here would be not too hard to get, and it just seems to pop a little bit too much for my taste. I would darken too the legs, and I would darken down some, especially the high spots in the branch here at the bottom, especially in this corner, in order to make sure that all of our attention goes up to the bird. And so we'll give that a 9. And who?
Okay. Is the photographer online? Rick, who shot this one?
Victoria Detweiler.
Oh, okay, Tori's online. Oh, she said she got disconnected a little bit ago. Yeah, she ran into a technical problem. She's no longer online. Okay, if she comes back on, we'll ask her to oh, she is now. Tori, would you comment on your picture, please? Her interpreter might not be available. Okay, we might come back to her later if we can. On to number 19.
Again, a good capture, and that's, I think, my point here. You people see pictures very, very well. That's not the issue. It's a matter of going from step one to step two that that always is difficult, and you have to train yourself to see the stuff before you can do something about it. I understand that. The brightest areas to me are just a little bit too bright. Some of the detailed whites should, even though there's some detail in some of them, they still appear to be a little bit further up that I think they should be. They're just a little too intense. The overall composition is pretty nicely balanced. I would consider a slight darkening in this upper right-hand corner, and about the bottom 15 or 20% I would darken as well. And I think that would just kind of hold things together a little bit better and maybe bring your attention into the center, because I think compositionally speaking, it just is, I want to look here, but I keep getting all of this. So I think darkening this down would be very, very helpful. We'll give that an 8.
Okay, can we hear from the photographer?
Yes, Steve Robertson. This was actually taken quite a long time ago. This was one of my first attempts with a digital camera back in 2009. We took a vacation to Yellowstone. So I was just sort of learning about digital cameras at the time. And I always liked this picture. I can see where, especially in the middle to the right, it's blown out. So I thank you for that. I always like this picture. I just like the difference in colors, and with Yellowstone, it's so unbelievable that you can just get pictures like this. It's like nowhere else on earth. So yeah, thank you.
Good, nicely done. Again, we've got a good capture. We have nice isolation of the subject. The whites are pushing the limit just a bit. I think I would bring them down. This, again, one of those things where it takes you a while to come to an understanding of what should be bright white and what should not be bright white. I always look at it from the standpoint that if you had to put a light source like the sun into the picture, obviously the sun would be the brightest thing in the image. But if something like this is already really that close to bright, then how much brighter could the sun be? This stuff, I think, needs to come down a fair amount. In terms of composition, it's not too bad. I think it would be nicer if this were separated from this a little better. I think if this were off to the right and this were staying about where it is now, the balance and the separation, the cropping, the tonal or the compositional balance, I think would be a little bit more comfortable to my mind. I would also just maybe bring a vignette down in here, darken this just a little bit. So we'll give it an 8 and go from there.
Good. And the photographer is?
It's Mark.
Okay.
Yeah. Thanks, Bryson. I was when you talked about darkening the bottom, I tried it and then decided to lighten it up a little bit. But this was a wind farm that I was out in Western New York that I happened to drive through and said, "Whoa, look at those!" And I said it screamed black and white because there was no clouds in the sky, and took the picture. But yeah, thanks for your comments. They're helpful.
Very good. I did hear a little chatter from the guy from Lenswork talking about something that I think I do and is something I think some people don't do. I mean, you see something, you get captivated by it, you take a picture, and then you move on. When what you should do is take a picture and then say, okay, is there another place that I can be that will make this better? Move to the right, move to the left, kneel down a little bit, try to get up a little bit, see if there's something else that changes the compositional element enough to give you a choice in terms of the content of the picture.
But you didn't have a wife and dog in the car wanting to go home.
Well, there's nothing you can do about that. That's sort of like, having a broken
true.
camera.
I took several pictures to make sure the propellers did not cross the two windmills.
Oh, good. That's good. That's good.
So, but I didn't change position. I should have done that.
In flight. This is an excellent capture. Nice sharp subject, nice soft background, nicely held low end detail. This is really, really just, this could have gone really fast. And so the lighting, I think, helped you in that respect because your dynamic range of your camera working very, very well. Good highlight detail, nice composition. And this is what I meant about room to fly. This is great. If this had the tendency of a lot of people is to take this and move it over here so that this space matches this space, and that would have, to my mind, just crowded him a little bit too much. This is balanced really, really well. You could, just nitpicking, raise the white point on this just a tiny bit, not enough to have anything start to creep up, get too bright, but it could just be just a tiny bit brighter. I do work on a calibrated monitor and I pay a really, really close attention to those details. Also, if I don't know, what the details are about how it was shot, but I perceive that this could have had some noise. And if that's the case, the control of that noise is nicely done. And I'm going to, because of the overall balance and just the overall impact of the image, this is a 10.
Right. And the photographer is.
That's me, Terry Longenecker. Thank you.
Terry, all right.
Oh, if I'd have known that, I'd have given it a 9.
Or an 11.
You were right. You were right. There was a bit of noise, and I used I can't think of it.
Topaz Photo AI.
Yes. And in fact, I've looked at this a couple of times and never liked it. And then when I ran it through the AI, I went, oh, I love it.
Yeah.
And I was gonna bring the white up, but I thought if I do, I might lose the detail that I have in it.
Well, you have to be careful and you have to really pay attention to the numbers for one thing, and the clipping and all that sort of thing. But it just the tiniest little bit worked when I fussed with it. And of course, the other option is, hey, it's good where it is, leave it alone. Okay. You don't want to get yourself in trouble, but it's it's good. It's a good capture, Terry, and very nicely done, very nicely presented.
That was shot with a 500 millimeter lens.
Yeah.
Down at oh God, my mind is going.
Conowingo Dam?
Conowingo Dam, thank you.
Really?
Yes. Oh yeah. And the sun it was a weird day that day. That's how I got that nice background. But
yeah, nicely done.
Thank you. I'm gonna try and lighten that up a little bit. And
not much, doesn't take a lot, just a couple points.
I'll just tweak it a little bit.
There you go.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Bryson, would you please go back to number 18? And I'm going to ask Tori if she'll comment about her picture. I see Tori, you're back online. Would you comment, please? Let's see if her interpreter's online. Tori, can you comment?
Can you hear the interpreter?
Oh, I can now, yes.
Can you hear the interpreter?
Yes.
Oh, yes. Oh, good. Oh, goodness. Yes. Okay. So, the Baltimore one, I have like a railroad tracks. Well, kind of like a track train around here, and the highway and the bridge was around there. It was like kind of a messy background. So you're right, like it was really a messy background. So I thought, I'll make it a little bit darker, and then I want like the bird to be, the full attention getter. So I did add the branch because I thought, I need a little bit of balance. You know what I mean? So I didn't want to just leave too much of the negative space. But yeah, that was really my reasoning.
Okay, thank you very much. Very good. Okay, Bryson, any comments in conclusion?
I think you'll find that the scores, I think, were delightfully on the high side. And I think that's a good thing, but it reflects the quality of the group in general. The capture is the first part. And of course, if you don't have that, if you don't have good light, if you don't have good composition, if you don't have a nice sharp subject, etc., why, the rest is irrelevant. So you start with something good, and then you refine it, and you tweak it, and you simplify it, and you just work as hard as you can to get something that is really going to impress people. And I think we have a couple of obvious successes here this evening. And even the ones that weren't 10s were extremely good. There are a lot of 8s and 9s in there. So
I
I'm
do have
happy.
a question though when you're done. I hate to interrupt. I'm so
Anyway,
sorry to
well, that's
interrupt.
okay. I am done.
Go ahead with your question.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Like, I definitely did not mean to interrupt, but so like Bryson, I'm just curious about the AI because I did use AI at the mask, to kind of tweak the background there. But
Yeah.
I'm just wondering, like, how do the judges feel about that?
I'm a big believer in the finished result being the important thing. I would never ask a painter what kind of paints, what kind of brush, whatever, this, that, or anything else. How you got there is extremely interesting, usually to other photographers. As a viewer, when I'm looking at something, I want to just look at it and go, that's fine. That works for me. I don't have a problem with it. If you used AI to darken that background and make him, isolate the bird, I'm perfectly fine with that. I don't have any issues with that at all. There are some things that I kind of question. I mean, if you just create something out of whole cloth, that would be a whole different thing. I've used AI to help me in situations where I thought, okay, I can do this in a minute with AI, or I can do it in 4 hours manually. Guess where I'm going to go? So I'll take the 1 minute solution.
Very good. Okay, let's open it up at this point. If you have a question or comment for Bryson or for any of the photographers in tonight's competition, go ahead. Okay. Oh, Rick, comment?
Yeah, this is Rick. I think everyone did a great job on the photos presented. I did have a question about number 8. What was the score on that one?
Number 8 was a 7. Frost Lotus.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and let me take a second just to thank Rick for his continued efforts in putting together the images that go to the judge. I really appreciate it. It takes time, and we appreciate the fact that he's continuing to be willing to do that. Anybody else have a question or a comment?
Yeah, I do. Can you expand on AI? Is it a program or?
We don't have enough time for that. No, it's a good question, but I will defer that to some other time because it is getting late. And I am curious to hear Bryson's thoughts sometime about artificial intelligence as it relates to photography. But Tom, that it can get into great depth. So let me defer that to another later meeting. As we now have the capability with the new Photoshop version to create objects from verbal prompts. And that's a whole different story, right, Bryson? Okay, anything else we can deal with at this moment?
Dennis, this is Dave Marchetto. I have a question for Bryson. Bryson, it was regarding the view objects comment you said to sort of blur the edges when you have the Lightroom program isolated like a rose or whatever. I don't understand how you, in a word, you would blur the edges.
You're blurring the edges of a mask that you're using, and that would apply more to Photoshop than it would to Lightroom. You're not blurring the subject.
Right, but can you do it in Lightroom? In other words, I think conceptually I understand it, but I wouldn't know how to do it in Lightroom.
No.
Since I'm more of a Photoshop
guy
than a Lightroom guy, I'm not sure that there is.
Okay.
Can't do it in
Okay.
Lightroom.
No. Okay.
Yeah, I'm just new to the,
to
picking
Dennis
out
on-
objects and so forth.
Yeah.
It usually works very well. And if I have a sharp object, I just go into the, to the image, and I might use a contrast tool on the edges, or, a texture image on, tool on the edges to smooth it out, but not on the mask.
Well, the mask, I would rather fuss with a mask than with the subject.
Sure.
All right. Because you can blend things together in ways that you don't even notice that they were blended.
Right.
If you have a good mask and you manage it well, and that's a talent. So
Bryson, is that using the feathering slider in the mask properties panel?
In Photoshop or Lightroom?
In Photoshop.
No, I don't feather anything. I don't believe in it.
Okay.
What I do is I make a mask, and then on the layer mask itself, I will use Gaussian blur and then introduce the feathering that I think is called for. There's a couple of reasons for that. One of which is that if you make a selection and then you feather it, and you made a bad decision on the feathering, you got to go back and start all over again. But if you blur the mask, you can go back one step and change the degree of blur. And it's just a little bit easier, I think, to refine the process.
Okay.
So, I don't, feathering isn't in my language list.
Okay, thanks. Anyone else?
Oh, and one more question, Ken. You do, we do workshops for Lightroom and Photoshop at the Art Center?
Dennis.
Oh, I do, yes. And Bryson teaches classes also.
Good.
Yeah, I teach at the mechanics.
Keep me up to date on that. I'd be interested in getting myself back up to speed. I used Photoshop years ago. It's been a while, and I'm starting from scratch here, guys.
Very good. You're the kind of guy I like. Bryson, do you have any classes upcoming?
Nothing planned. I don't think that summertime works real well for planning those things. Maybe I'll come up with something for the fall. We'll see how it works.
Bryson, hi, Rich Scott, quick question. Could you tell me what you use for a monitor in terms of your calibration? What kind of monitor do you use?
My monitor is an ISO, EIZO. There's another one that's very good. The name escapes me at the moment, but it seems to also be another very popular one. I did try a less expensive NEC a few years back, and it's a decent monitor overall, but it doesn't seem to hold the calibration as well as I would like. So I think the ISO is a better choice. You're not talking $300 monitors here. You're talking $1,100, $1,200, $1,300 monitors. I got my ISO on a deal when I just happened to check into B&H Photo one day, and they were having a sale, and I got like $400 off and went, "Oh, you're mine." Because those a really good monitor is not cheap. The other brand that is very, very good that I can't remember the name of, if I do, I'll try and.
Might it be BenQ?
Yeah,
Yeah, BenQ, that's it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Now the BenQs, I think, have a tendency to be a little less expensive.
Mhm.
But they're very good, and I know a lot of professionals that have those on their list of my favorite monitors. So that would be my other.
That's what Joe and I use.
Oh, right.
BenQ.
Yeah, they're
Thank
they're
you.
good. They're
Thank you
very,
very much.
very good. Yeah.
So Bryson, talking about monitors, you could buy a high-end monitor. Does the quality of the PC itself have an impact on how the image appears on the monitor? Like, can you get an expensive monitor and a cheap computer?
Well, you're dealing with the graphics card that's in the monitor. So, the PC itself, if that's what you're working on, the computer itself wouldn't really make a whole lot of difference, but I don't think I'd go cheap on the graphics card. Now, if it's a cheap enough computer, it might have an onboard graphics card, so you may not be, you may be stuck unless you could add a better one to it. But graphics cards have gotten way better for way less. I do remember spending $450 on a graphics card way back when. Now you can get easily that kind of quality for $1.25, $1.50.
Okay.
So.
Okay, guys, if you'll please unmute yourselves, let's do our traditional thing here at the end of the meeting. Bryson, let me say, I really appreciate your efforts here. Everybody enjoys your comments and your critiques. So thanks a lot for continuing to do this for us. Guys, let's give Bryson a nice round of applause, as well as the photographers today.
Thanks, Bryson.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Excellent
much.
photography.
Thank
Yep.
Thanks,
you.
Bryson.
Thank you.
Thank
Good
you,
work,
guys.
Super job.
I continue to be impressed with your images. I mean, we're all learning and continuing to grow, and our images just keep getting better and better. So thanks. Keep up the good work.
Good
Okay,
night.
guys. Thank you and good night.
Night,
Very good.
everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thanks again, Bryson.